everybody. We're back. We want to acknowledge really quickly that our colleague Luigi had a great segment coming up. We unfortunately lost that connection. So, such is with live feeds, live broadcasts. But we want to thank her and acknowledge the time that she spent preparing for this. So, thank you very much. She's one of our partners. Um, Moving on, though, it's my great pleasure to moderate our next segment, communicating about climate. So, as you know, I'm a science communicator. I've actually been really excited for this panel. My guests are the director of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech University, Katharine Hayhoe, the Sant director of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, Kirk, and producer, writer, and storyteller, Adam Paul Smith. Thank you so much for joining us, the three of you, today.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have all of you. So this is a star-studded panel. We don't need to say that, but it's very true. So there's a lot to get into. There's a lot to learn from all of you. Adam, I want to start with you. I want to ask you about your method of storytelling. But before we do that, I'd like to share a clip with our viewers from the upcoming feature film Canary. So let's take a look.
Part of the satisfaction from the job is taking what appears to be an impossible task and making it possible. And scientists do this all the time. Once you go up to 20,000 feet, it's a different world. To live in a tent for 2 or 3 months, to live on food that's sometimes not even available. It's very cold. There's very little oxygen. You're trying to survive. And without the right people, it would be totally impossible to do what we do. Having a dream that other people can buy into is how anything succeeds. They have to become part of that dream. They have to feel that they are major players in that dream. And then the dream becomes part of them. If you can make that happen, then you have a great team.
Wow, I literally lost my train of thought because that was so beautiful. So, Adam, how do you tell a story that's not just doom and gloom, especially when the reality is that future projections indicate things are looking not always so good?
That is a good question. The situation we are facing is arguably the biggest challenge of our lifetime and the biggest threat to our existence. And for the most part, we don't seem to be dealing with that. What we are seeing, as showcased through this fantastic summit, is evidence of people all over the world doing something. With Canary, we do not gloss over the struggle nor the challenge, we lean into it. The treasure of uncovering a story like Canary is that it has inspiration at its core, allowing us as an audience to face the worst, but come out the other side motivated and inspired to act. As a society, we are facing a challenge that seems impossible. Canary is the story of someone who, through sheer determination and international collaboration, overcomes what was believed to be impossible. It's not just inspiring, it's a roadmap to making the impossible possible.
I think you touch on something incredibly profound, which I think all of our speakers can probably agree with, which is, hope is a great ignition. It's something to propel you forward, but it's not a strategy. And ultimately, we have to take courage, lean into the fact that we are in a situation, and find a roadmap out there. Amazing work. Again, I was watching it just being like, this is absolutely gorgeous. Katharine, I want to turn to you. So much of what we hear in the news is people disagreeing with or dismissing the science of climate change. You're a scientist, so what is your response to that?
Mhm. Well, 99.9% of the time, we know that they don't actually have a problem with science. We know that they have a problem with the solutions, or rather, what they perceive to be the solutions: destroying the economy, taking away our right to choose what type of car we drive, letting the United Nations control the world. These are what people perceive to be the solutions. But our defense mechanism is such that rather than say it's a real problem, but I don't want to fix it, we make up reasons, sciencey sounding reasons, even religiously sounding reasons, why it can't possibly be. Because if I say it's a real problem and I don't want to fix it, that makes me the bad guy. And none of us want to be the bad guy. So what's the solution? The solution is not hitting people upside the head with more science. It's showing people that there are positive, practical, beneficial, and hopeful ways to fix this that we can all get on board with.
Yeah, you said something fantastic, which is how do we include people who may have been resistant to the narrative and include them in the narrative to make it feel like a path forward for everyone that benefits everyone, so that we're not at odds with each other. That's incredibly intelligent. Kirk, as what's the role of a museum, your museum, arguably one of the most famous in the world, in communicating climate change to the masses? And what kind of conversations do you hope people will have around the dinner table that were inspired by the museum?
We have a remarkable audience. About 5 million people a year come to the museum, and it's a different 5 million people every year. So cumulatively, we'll see something like 45 to 50 million people in a decade. They come from all across the country and all around the world. So it's a very broad audience, and it sort of is one of the things we love about the audience is that we're one of the few places where we're not just preaching to the choir, we're preaching to a whole bunch of people. But of course, climate itself is a pretty complicated topic, and the way we've chosen to tell it is by putting it in the context of deep time, talking about Earth's climate in the past and looking at the various different types of climates that were in the past, times when there were no polar ice caps at all, or when there were polar ice caps all the way down to the equator. And both of those things have occurred on planet Earth. And our approach is to show what's possible and how it works and how it fits in with the rest of the story of life on the planet. The trick then is how do you bring it forward and relate it to people in terms of today's timing? Is it something that I have to worry about as a person, or is it something that happened a long time and it doesn't matter to me? And it turns out we're so clearly in the middle of it right now. You can actually draw a straight line from things like the world 56 million years ago when we had forests in the polar regions to a time maybe a couple hundred years in the future where we might have the conditions in the atmosphere that will lead to that same kind of ancient climate reasserting itself. So in a way, the museum presents the Earth archive of what's happened in the past and helps people understand that it's possible it could happen in the future. And looking into the future is like looking into the past and vice versa. So it's a tool to make the subject more accessible and obvious and interesting rather than threatening.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think what happens then is you get those conversations thinking, in the minds of people in the museum, people take that home. Maybe it sparks a conversation. Maybe it makes that perspective a little bit more approachable, a little less politicized. Maybe the museum, through all of this, isn't able to be an authority, and is the Smithsonian in general is a key source of information that people still continue to respect, and I think that's in large part from the work that you do. So, Adam, as a filmmaker, you're also trying to reach large audiences, much like the museum. How would you respond to someone who says, I'm not an environmentalist. Why should I care about this topic? Why should I watch this film?
That's a great question. I think at the core of this film, it's really a story about adventure. And I think if I can point to a show that I'm not sure if you're familiar with, Chef's Table. I bring it up because
Yeah.
one of our two directors, Danny O'Malley, plays a key role in that show. And what they do so well is tell you stories, yes, about chefs, but really about people. And so when Alex Revest, our co-director and MIT-trained PhD neuroscientist, are connected with Danny, what they set out to do is do for scientists what Chef's Table has so successfully done for chefs. In their words, it's time to make scientists superheroes. So to answer your question, I mean, what I'm seeing here in Canary is not like any issue-based documentary I've seen before. So it's the idea here is to bring people into the fold through a great adventure story. It's about the life and lives of explorers who happen to be climate scientists. It's an exploration into the highest glaciers on Earth, once considered too high for human beings, and where technology at the time did not exist to do what they ultimately succeeded in doing. But the journey wasn't easy. It's a struggle. And I think by showing that struggle, we end up rooting for our characters. And I think that pulls people into the issue in a way that if we were to go directly, focusing on the issue, we would never achieve.
Uh, what I'm hearing from you, and the spirit of Adam's answer, and also what Catherine has said, is that the days of kind of just delivering just facts and hoping that that will stick, we're sort of moving to a different strategy. And I want to hear from all three of you what the importance is of personal stories, talking about climate change through personal stories
Mm.
are. And can we start with Kirk about that?
One of the things I always love to talk to people about is their own personal use of gasoline, because that's the most direct connection you have to the production of CO2 gas. I mean, of course, you admit CO2 when you talk, but I always ask people, a gallon of gasoline, how much does it weigh? 6.5 pounds. How much of that weight is carbon, pure carbon? It's about 5 pounds. When you burn the gasoline, you get about 18 pounds of carbon dioxide gas that comes out of your tailpipe and into the atmosphere. And just that connection of everyone pumps their own gas, everybody knows what a gallon of gas is. They never stop to think about what that means in terms of carbon dioxide, what that means in terms of their contribution to greenhouse gases. And then I take it one step further and say, if that carbon came out of your tailpipe as solid chunks, you would get 5 pounds of carbon briquettes for every gallon of gas you burned. And imagine if your car left its waste not as invisible odorless gas, but as chunks of carbon. And you can imagine what the highways would look like with all those piles of carbon briquettes. And that seems to really strike home because everybody drives, everybody puts gas in their cars. It's a sort of simple way of bringing home the invisible nature of carbon dioxide and making it personal to people's usage.
Absolutely. Catherine, what do you have to say about that?
Mm. I would completely agree. Making this personal is so important. Kurt gave a great example of how we can make our actual emissions personal. Another way to do that is stepping on the carbon scales and seeing how much we actually produce every year. But the greatest problem that we have is not whether we agree with it or even our detachment from our personal responsibility. The biggest problem we have is our detachment from the impacts. It's something that social scientists call psychological distance. We believe, and the majority of us agree, that climate change will affect future generations. It will affect plants and animals, people who live far away. We don't think it affects us. So, connecting the dots between how climate change is already affecting us right here in the places where we live and right now today through personal stories of people impacted by wildfires burning greater area, by hurricanes dumping almost double the amount of rain, by increased risk of heavy rainfall, flood, heat waves, and more. Connecting the dots between real people and real impacts today is so important and so powerful.
Yeah, I agree with you in the sense that it seems like if you can't see it happening in your local community, maybe it's not happening. If it's happening somewhere else in someone else's community, maybe you don't have to worry about that. And so imparting, how we're an interconnected system can be tricky, but really crucial in telling that story. And when it's a personal story, it does that job much easier.
Yeah.
Adam, you're a storyteller. How do you use personal stories? Obviously, Canary is a great example of that.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I agree um, on the point of the impact feels far away. And I will say that it did take me going up to almost 19,000 feet to Kokaya, the largest tropical ice cap in the world, to really see that melt and see the people that live down from that glacier and the impacts that it'll have on their lives, both directly from the flooding that comes, and also just the result of not having water in the future, and all their hydrological power system that's based on that. And you know, we portray that, I think, pretty clearly in the film. You know, bottom line is we learn the best when facts are connected to people, and more specifically, their story. This may seem intuitive, but few do it. Educational psychology research supports this. I quote, "It's been found that by sharing scientists' background and their struggles, students better retained and recalled the findings and concepts." Hollywood at its best tells stories about people, not facts or issues. Characters overcoming odds and growing through that process. With the typical issue-based stories, whether they're docs or science programming, there's not much reason you want to go back once you have the information, but you are going to want to rewatch or go back on an adventure again, say with Indiana Jones.
It sounds like you're, saying that we need a blending of both of those things. We need wonderful storytelling, but it can't be without some kind of factual basis, something that makes us feel, compel us to action, compel us to consider our actions in our own lives, take it back to our own personal narrative. Okay, so I want to get to the point of this
Exactly.
where we are practical here and we help people understand what they can do to have these tough conversations. And Catherine, you are the queen of this. How can we have a constructive conversation about climate change with people who may not agree with us?
hmm Well, first of all, the single most important thing any of us can do is use our voice to advocate for change at every level. We can talk about personal responsibility, but the truth is that 90 corporations are responsible for two-thirds of our heat trapping gas emissions since the dawn of the industrial era. And even if each of us did everything we could, we don't even have the options available to most of us to live a carbon-free life yet. That's why using our voice is the most important thing any one of us can do to advocate for change at every level in our school, our business, our place of work, our organizations, our community, our city, our state, and our country. How do we have those positive conversations? Well, here is the secret. They have to begin by something that we agree on, not something we disagree on. So often we begin conversations with somebody we disagree with by focusing on what we disagree on. We have to figure out a way to bond over values that we truly share with someone, then connect the dots to how climate change affects something we both genuinely care about. And then do not neglect, in fact, this may be the most important point, to bring in solutions that they could get on board with that they don't perceive as compromising their values, their identity, or their political ideology. I lay it out and with lots of interesting examples in my TED Talk, but that is the core of the secret.
It's a great point. Yeah, how can we do this together, not apart? Um, Kirk, I want to jump back to you. So, how important is it to have someone like Catherine on your advisory board, who she's in a lot of ways she's within the choir, but in a lot of ways she's outside of the choir, and represents a lot of people who are not typically thinking about maybe the natural history or climate change. How important is it to have a voice like Catherine on the advisory board?
She's fabulous on the board. I mean, she brings this incredible set of skills. The skills I really wanted from her, and she brings in spades, is this ability to recognize that you have to bridge gaps with people before they will even start to listen to you. And so many scientists just think you can collaborate people with facts and the facts rule a day. And we know that's just not the case. You need the facts and they anchor our science and our policy, but you have to have the ability to communicate productively with people that believe things in a different way than you do. And she's the master at sort of framing those conversations. And as a Christian, she's able to kind of bridge that gap as well. We've had similar kinds of controversies in the past with evolution and creationism, where there's this apparent conflict between religion and science. And really, it's a conflict between values as they are expressed, and finding ways to break through those barriers, or how we're going to be able to work together to solve big problems that take all of society, not one half of society or one quarter of society. So Katharine's contributions are fabulous. Plus, she's a genius on social media.
That is a valuable skill, one I don't have. So, with the couple minutes we have left, I have one final question for everyone. Let's take this home and bring it back to why we're all here, which is about optimism. In all of your experience as communicators, how important is communicating optimism to your audiences to help lessen the paralysis we feel from fear, and possibly even compel people to take action? And Adam, if we could have you answer that first.
Sure. I think that, again, to my point before about uh, just grounding our stories in the reality of the situation, as opposed to glossing over the tough stuff, and showing the struggle that people go through, that individuals go through, in order to overcome whatever it is that they're currently fighting. Because this is not a story that we can conclude nicely with a bow and say it's all done, because it's not. That we still have this problem ahead of us. So I think it's about really leaning into the difficult stuff, and through that imparting what it takes to overcome the challenge, to turn what's perceived to be impossible and make it possible. I think that's really sort of the basis for at least the way that we're operating in telling our story through or telling Lonnie's story through the film Canary.
Absolutely. Catherine, what do you have to say about that?
Without fear, without hope, we will be a self-fulfilling prophecy of despair. As you pointed out, fear is good for short-term action, but ultimately it paralyzes us. Our hope should not be irrational, though. It's not burying our head in the sand and hoping everything will work out okay. We need our hope to be fully
Yeah.
informed by how bad the problem is, but guiding us towards a vision of a future that can truly be better than the one we have today.
Absolutely. Uh, Kirk, take us home. What do you think?
My whole thing is trying to make people learn how to think positively about the future. It's easy to be scared of what might happen, but it's also a much better approach is to imagine the world you want to have. What do you want the world to look like in the year 2100? Because a kid born today is going to be an 80-year-old in 2100. So all these scenarios we paint will have happened in the lifetime of your children. So I want people to think about how to make the world a better place. And the way to do that is to define what you want to see and build a plan toward that thing. That's the way to get there, is to imagine a better future and build the
Yeah,
path towards that,
completely.
and let the apocalypses fall away on the sides.
Well, that is a fantastic way
That's a
to
great
end this
answer.
panel. Catherine, Kirk, and Adam, thank you so much for joining us today. I had a wonderful time talking to you. And again, thank you for your time.